Hello everyone, I'm Shweta and I'm an intern at Law Minds and the topic is separation of power. Okay, so I'll be starting with the introduction part. According to the notion of operation of power, government functions best when its powers are distributed across several parts rather than being vested in a single authority. Now, this line is the gist of the separation of power, which is our topic. It basically means if there are some powers, it will not be vested under one authority. It will be distributed among all the governmental officials or authorities. Okay, so while many countries have accepted this idea, it is not strictly adhered to. This line basically means that there are countries which have adopted this idea but do not strictly stick to it. United States of America was the first country to adopt it, and the concept of separation of powers originated in India in the 17th century. The three powers of the government the thinkers mentioned were the ability to enact laws, enforce them, and interpret them. Now, in India, if we'll see, so enact laws is vested under the legislatives, enforce them is vested under our executive, and interpret them is vested under our judiciary. Now we'll be discussing the aims and the objectives of separation of power. The first of all, it seeks to transform the administration into one that is more democratic and responsible by overcoming its authoritarianism, tyranny, and inconsistency. Now, what does this basically mean? It's that separation of power tries to transform the administration and make it more democratic in nature, and it does that by overcoming three main things. First is authoritarianism, which basically means a form of government in which governing body is absolute and is having more powers than the others. The second is tyranny. It means unjust or oppressive governmental power. And inconsistency, which I might believe that you all already know, is not regular. Is it's something which is not regular and which is erratic in nature. Now, the second benefit is that it allows for oversight of how the various branches and divisions of government use their authority to prevent abuse of power by these particular groups. Okay, now different bodies have been provided with different powers and they try to look after the other and try to see that there are no misuses of the powers given to them and they try to prevent abuse of powers by the other authorities. And the Indian constitutions have strictly provided them with the parameters and tasks uh, to use these powers of oversighting them. The minimum and maximum values of these domains are spelled out in detail in the Indian Constitution, and it is their responsibility to work within these parameters and complete their task. As I have already explained it, the Constitution is the ultimate and sovereign standard in our nation. Everything that might lead an idle or notion to deviate from its preamble should be addressed. Now, as you all know, that the preamble is the basic or preface of a formal legal document, and these groups are particularly required to adhere by the Constitution and its preamble. The third benefit is that separation of powers hold each branch of government accountable and responsible for its own actions. Now, no other group of branch or like group or branch of government would be accountable and responsible for other person's actions. Okay, now this also serves as an example of checks and balances, which we'll be further discussing in the upcoming slides. Fourthly, the idea of separation of powers splits authority into three parts. Now, this means that rather than having all power in one branch, as we have discussed already, which would lead into inconsistencies, which means not regular, something which is not regular. It is feasible to have a balance of power which improves democracy and the efficiency of the government. Last but not least, giving each branch a distinct function to do enables them to develop their abilities via the use of available resources and establish expertise in that role and responsibility. This is done with the aim of enhancing, promoting, and multiplying the efficiency of the government. So, now suppose that you have been given some power or given some responsibility to perform, and if you're given this power for suppose for a month, wouldn't you be having an expertise on doing that thing? So this is how we also, in separation of power, evaluate this, that it is done with the aim of enhancing, promoting, and multiplying the efficiency of the government. Now we'll be talking about separation of power, particularly in India. In India, there are three major powers of government, and each of them is performed by a separate organ, which you already know. It is legislature, executive, and judiciary. Okay, the Constitution of India had laid separate functions of the organs of the government in the following ways. Now, judiciary, as we all know, is an independent body, and this is given under Article 50 of our Indian Constitution. The conduct of judges cannot be taken about in the parliament and state legislature as provided under Article 121 and 211. Now, Article 121 specifically states that no discussions shall takes place with respect of any judges conduct in the parliament, and 211 states this only, but in respect to state legislatures. The powers of executive are vested with president, and in a state is vested with governor as per Article 53 and 154. Now, Article 53 specifically talks about the president, and Article 154 talks about the powers of the governor. The legislature, in certain cases, like impeachment of the president or removing the judges. Now, what do you mean by impeachment? The word means it is the process of bringing charges against the government official because of his misconduct or not following the law, or the Indian not adhering by our Indian constitution. Now, or removing the judges may have judicial powers. The legislature have these powers, which is impeachment and removing of judges. Likewise, the executive has certain powers to appoint judges and chief justice, which can affect the functioning of the judiciary. Now, all these three have the powers of checks and balances. Now, this is how this separation of power affects and benefits are, you know, all the three governmental organs. The executive can exercise the powers of the legislature in circumstances when the legislature is not in session and there is an urgent need to make laws. This is provided as under Article 123 to promulgate ordinance. Now, what does this sentence basically means? There are some times when legislature is not able to or to make laws. So at that time, executives are responsible to make laws, and the other peoples are asked to follow and abide by these laws. Now, this particular provision is mentioned under Article 123, which is promulgate ordinance. Now, what does this ordinance word means? It means command or order, and an ordinance is provided by the president in the recess of the parliament. So parliament also have a recess period in which if certain emergency comes up, so the president have the power to pass the ordinance. Okay. Okay, now we'll be discussing the case laws and then we'll be ending our session with the conclusion. So, our first case law is Keshavanand Bharti, Sripada Galvaru and others versus State of Kerala and others. The argument was that judiciary should not interfere if the parliament decides to change the law, even if it was unconstitutional. However, the court held that the argument is vague and the doctrine of separation of power is the basic structure of the Indian constitution and it shall not be violated. So the main judgment which came under this case was that if any law is coming up or any law the legislature is making should make sure that it is abiding by the structure, the basic structure of the constitution, and it's not uh, violating that basic structure. Now, what is the basic structure? It is the preamble. This has always been integral part of the constitution, and the judiciary along with executive and legislature are bound to follow the constitution, which has provided distinction between the relationship of these three organs. After this decision, the doctrine was recognized as an integral part of the basic structure of the Indian constitution. Next case is Ram Javaya Kapoor versus State of Punjab. In this case, it was held by the court that even though the doctrine of separation of power is not mentioned in the constitution, but the functions of one organ should not be performed by the other. These organs should exercise its powers beyond what is provided by the constitution. Now, if you will see that judiciary have the power to interpret the law, okay, and the legislature have the power to make the laws. So it cannot be possible that the judiciary makes the law and the legislature interprets the law. They have different criterias and different powers provided by the constitution, and they are forced to abide by these powers. Okay, the next case is Indira Nehru Gandhi versus Raj Narayan. This is a very famous case, and the first one was also very famous case. And okay, so it was observed that the basic structure of the constitution cannot be changed even when Article 368 provides the amendment of the constitution. So if there isn't any amendment in the constitution, the legislatures have to make sure that the basic structure is still maintained. The basic structure is not harmed by that amendment. The court further observed that the doctrine in India has a broad sense than that of UK and USA, which followed the doctrine in a very rigid manner. The last case is Golaknath versus State of Punjab. The Constitution of India is supreme and no other authority can be above it. This was stated in this case that the Constitution of India has a supreme authority and no other organs can be above it. The functions of the three organs should be carried out within respective power. They should not go beyond their power as provided by the law of land. All the organs should work as per the law of land. Okay, so now we'll be discussing the conclusion, and the conclusion is that the theory in debate, it means that the separation of power must be judged not only on the basis that it's an absolute way, but in relation to its actual purpose, what it is basically talking about. Now, the only way to fully extract its meaning is to have a broader view. You cannot have a narrower view and read this topic. You should have a broader view and perceive it within a wide context, especially in this age. In this age, we mean it by we have privatization, anarchy, and globalization. So we should have a broader view while seeing separation of power. Now, and also limiting it to just the idea of being used as a medium of categorizing, that though in a rigorous way should not be done and instead should be used in good spirit of unity. And it can be argued that this idea notion is not compatible to work in its literal meaning, but it can do so and succeed by laying emphasis on the checks and balances that are placed so as to make it a good government in its true form and make it possible to eradicate power, manipulation, and misuse by the different sections and domains of the government. The effective working of a democracy requires doctrine of separation of power to be essential part of the constitution. Okay, so this was the whole gist about the separation of power, and thank you for listening to me.